Hey guys, just tweeting out. So before I start the conversation, my name is Bobby Amar. Welcome to my conversation where I want to talk about how to disagree with people without putting them down. And I brought this up because if you look at my pinned tweet, it's a big part of what I talk about. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to have conversations with folks who want to share their knowledge as well and see kind of what they're doing with discourse and conversations and debates and discussions. I think it's a very common thing that we all struggle with. And I thought, as part of the Power of Connection discussion, it might be a fun exercise to talk with one another about this. And so I normally run, and if you look at me on Twitter, I mean, I've certainly been on Twitter for a while and I spend a lot of time there and I have a lot of followers. So, pardon me. But for the most part, I also, run this Twitter space once a week on Mondays, usually on 11 a.m., 11:15 a.m. Eastern. But for the summer, I was kind of off. So now I'm back. And so I thought I'd start the conversation and see if people want to join in. And if you are interested in this conversation on whether you're here to learn or whether you're here to maybe share or share some knowledge, I'd love to have you on here. I'll start tweeting a few people in here to try to see if I can get more folks to join us. But if you want to come on stage, just put your hand up and let me know if you're interested in that because I think it'll be a really interesting conversation about that. And of course, I'll share my thoughts too in terms of how I do that. I think that I'd love to have you join us. So if anyone here is interested in learning about or discussing how you disagree with people, and when I say putting them down, I mean oftentimes when we have debates, we get it gets heated, it's sensitive, and it's hard for people to have that conversation because people get hurt, they get upset, they get angry, and so how do we navigate this platform where we can actually do a better job of creating a space where we can all actually engage each other and talk to each other in a way where no one feels denigrated or put down. So uh, I'm going to start by inviting people on stage to say, "Hey, do you want to share anything?" And I see a few people I know come on stage and just share your thoughts. I want to hear what that means to you. I'll start by telling you a bit about, and again, I put up in the space of above in the tweet the nest above a tweet to invite people. So if you can tweet that out there, or you can use the DMs to get people to join us, that would be great. I want to get many people in the room, so it just starts with you guys tweeting it out there and or DMing folks. I think that's the way to get going, right? So I'd appreciate that help and support. Um, I'll introduce myself. My name is Bobby Umar. I am a professional speaker by trade. For the last 17 years, I've traveled around the world and I've delivered over 1,000 keynotes and workshops to half a million people, I guess, over 4 continents. I've done 5 TEDx talks. And I'm also a social media influencer on Twitter with 500,000 followers, in LinkedIn with 70,000, and Instagram with 30,000. And I would say for the most part, I'm also very vocal about things. I certainly quite political on Twitter. I engage in social commentary on Facebook, and I even do that on LinkedIn. So I've had experience doing that across the board. And in doing so, obviously things get heated. Things get really hard to say. And sometimes, I've also uh, held myself back because sometimes I really want to rant, and then I don't. Although I've chosen to rant in a more, I guess, evidence based, emotional, somber, emotional way when I rant about things. When I'm talking about elections or I'm talking about things, I usually don't go off on a really really rough tangent of anger and hate, but I do try to. I usually try to have like a point, and I try to have a positive note moving forward. I know some people don't. That's fine, and I try really hard not to put people down. Sometimes it happens in the midst of anger or frustration. I mean, I certainly know that happens to people. And if you look at my pinned tweet on my profile, it's something that I firmly believe in over a longer period of time. That if you want to create unity, you want to create inclusivity, you want to create a better world, generally speaking, you need to create a place where you can disagree with people without putting them down and create understanding and use empathy and kindness, compassion. There are times to be angry, there are times to vent, there are times to yell, but over the long term, if you want to build bridges, you have to build that understanding. So that's kind of my general thesis of kind of how I live. But That said, I see people join us on stage, which is great. I'm going to start by saying, Ja, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? It's good to see you. Introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
Hey, thanks, Bobby. Hi everyone. I'm Juwadia, and I'm a marketing specialist and MBA and a lot of other things. My bio is full. But this is a really, really important topic, especially with how spaces nowadays have been really, really heated up. I see a lot of difficult conversations happening. I see a lot of fights, a lot of disagreeing with someone without putting them down is definitely a much needed topic. Thank you so much, Bobby, for opening this space. When I saw this, I was like, I have to be here because I just came from a space actually 2 days ago where I watched people being bullied for just stating different perspectives, and it was very hard to watch. And yeah, so it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Can you tell me more about that conversation? Like, what was the topic and what were people disagreeing
Uh,
on?
all right, so I had some time and I needed to get in a space. I wanted to see what's going on with the world. And then I just went on Space's dashboard and I kind of picked an interesting topic and I went in. And as soon as I came in, I saw the host was instigating basically. So every time they bring someone on the stage, it was a bunch of speakers. So there were 12 speakers, and then they would bring someone up and they would basically bully that person up every time they try to give their points. And the speaker was only giving the speakers only 1 minute to excuse me, to state their point. So in that 1 minute, that person is trying to state their point, and every time they would interrupt and they would bully them. And then I came up and I decided to kind of give a positive perspective on the situation. The
Sorry to interrupt,
situation was,
Gia.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Gia. Just can you give some context of what the topic
Yes.
was? Like, what was the
So
topic?
the topic was about racism. It was about racism and it was about Queen Elizabeth, and it was a very, very difficult conversation. And anyone who tried to come in to state their perspective on racism, to state their perspective, I'm from Sudan, I'm African. So there are Africans everywhere. So I tried to state my perspective as a Black Sudanese person who lives in Asia, and they were having none of it. So it's the way that they disagreed with me without kind of being racist to me at the same time. And I tried to tell them that when we have these difficult conversations, the only way that we can move forward is by listening to each other, is by hearing our different perspectives. And again, it was a very difficult space. A lot of people were bullied because of it. And I think we're still really behind when it comes to communicating our message without shouting, without enforcing it in a harsh way to the other party. So this is something that we really need to do. And it kind of incited this passion inside of me that the art of communicating your message without being angry about it, because no one is going to listen to you really if you're coming in with hot emotions and you're trying to communicate a message. No one is going to listen to you when you're angry. So yeah.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Gia. And I mean, I think, yes, one of the things I will say about that is that you can hold space for different points of view, and a part of it comes from the people who are facilitating. So if if the room was all about, okay, this is a room about why the Queen's awesome, and you know, and we don't like people who disagree with that, then yeah, that's a problem. They're going to create a space that's going to be antagonistic and not really inclusive. I mean, for me, my thing would be to go up and say, listen, is this a safe space to have different points of view? I would ask that question first thing. And if they say, well, you can tell how they respond to that. If they say yes, I said, fine, I'm going to try. And based on your response, I will know whether it's a safe space or not. And in doing so, I'll share my point of view, and then we'll see how they respond. And I think there are, again, a big part of it is who the leaders are, who's actually facilitating the conversation. I think that goes a long way. But I also believe that you can hold space for both things. You can hold space to empathize for those who mourn the loss of the queen, and to empathize for those who are struggling with all the negative aspects of what the queen I guess the monarchy has done. And so, for me, if I were to create a space, I would set that space. Or if I wanted to have a space where I didn't want to have those dissenting points of view, I might say, look, this is a space just for those who are grieving, and you just say that, and that's fine, right? And I think it's okay to have that space too. If people want, if because you attract that audience of the people who are going to be there, and if somebody wants to come up and disagree and present that other view, I mean, they have to like realize that that room, the content of the room, is people grieving. So if you're going to go against that, and it's going to hurt people, right? So people are grieving because they're going to get defensive, and so that's a again that context to me matters tremendously. But yeah, I think this whole idea of these people who are antagonized, and again, the other thing that's happening probably in that room, Gia, is like people weren't really supporting those because if there are multiple people dissenting, did anyone call them out for not creating a safe space? I'm curious about that.
It was actually the space was actually held by Africans as well. So that was the upsetting part about is that it wasn't a grieving space. It was an angry space. I am all for having difficult conversations. I think the art of conducting difficult conversations in a forum, we don't have that. That's one thing I'm realizing with spaces nowadays is that we cannot have a difficult conversation in a way that we can have a productive conclusion at the end of the space. So we can discuss, we can be angry about it, we can get passionate about it, but there is an art on where you can hear an opposing perspective to your points and handling that with respect in a respectful manner, hearing different perspectives, hearing different global perspectives. Because one of the things that I realized the host doesn't realize is that, and the speakers, is that Twitter Spaces is a public forum, global public forum. So you're going to have people coming in from all of the world, different perspectives, different experiences, different backgrounds. So in my personal opinion, if someone is not ready to handle these different perspectives, they shouldn't they shouldn't host. Basically, they shouldn't hold and open spaces for a discussion that is that big unless you have the mind skills and the emotional intelligence to handle and the resilience to handle those spaces.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, but the real question is, how many people have the capacity to do that? Because the truth is,
You're
when you
right. Yep.
when you take very sensitive or inflammatory topics, and there's lots out there. Politics, by its very nature, is highly flammable, and the proportion of people who are passionate about social or political causes that can facilitate rooms is very like with that type of headspace really low. So I think there's two parts. One is, yeah, it'd be nice to encourage people to create spaces. Like, I mean, I try to create space here in Twitter Spaces, in the Power Connect chat, to have people come on stage and disagree with me, and that's okay, and it's safe. I try to do that with how I tweet, so I try to create that behavior. But I also think, I think other people need to stand up and speak up for others as well, to support them as allies, to say, like, I may not disagree with her or him or them, but I will allow them the space for them to share what they want to share, and I will support that. I mean, it's a very common thing that people should be able to do. I think that, and it starts with that. Now, that said, the one thing I will say is that you know, there are certain topics where, it's sometimes it's okay to be angry. And I'll tell you a little story, interesting story. When I put my tweet up there, which is my pinned tweet, which says you can disagree with someone without putting it down. There's a whole tweet I put about building bridges versus building divide, understanding empathy, all that type of stuff. But I was always focused on that. And then I think my position changed a little bit during the George Floyd incident. And I was talking to a lot of people in my community, in my spaces, and they were really angry. And I started to realize, you know what, it's okay to be angry. And I realized that sometimes temporarily you need to spout, you need to spew, you need to rant, you need to vent. And it's okay. It's okay to do that. I think it's okay to do that once in a while. My general take is that, yeah, I hold space for that. And people are angry about things that are happening. Yes, I can totally see that. Like if, it's kind of like that mama bear thing. If someone went after my kids and started saying something, oh man, I would get pretty angry, man. Papa Bear would get very upset if anyone did anything to harm my children or put them in harm's way. So I think, yeah, but in general speak, but again, if you want to change the world, you want to bring people on your side, yelling at them over a long period of time will not work. Making them feel like crap over a long period of time will not work. Would you have to find a way? Where can you connect? Where do you find a bridge? Where do you find a way to understand them? And often people respond to my tweet and they say, oh, "Well, what about these people who are so far down there? Oh my God, they're horrible." And I said, "Look, this is not for them. That philosophy is not for them. Like the focus on building bridges." So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm trying to promote same-sex marriage in America. Okay. Now, other countries are far more liberal. Like I'm in Canada, so 80% of Canadians support same-sex marriage, but 20% do not. In America, and maybe it's a little bit more divisive. In other countries, even far more divisive. But what I would do is I would try to focus on those who are somewhere closer to the fence than the ones who are far gone on a far gone side of the fence. You try to get people to share their story, to share their thoughts, ask them if I can share my thought or my opinion on things. And next thing you know, we're having a conversation that I might actually shift them a little bit. And that's it. Because the other thing, too, to what you were saying before, is that you're not going to solve the problem in that one Twitter space, right? You're not going to solve the problem right away. It's about creating spaces, having conversations, and then maybe you do it again, and maybe you do it again. Some people might shift the first time, others might shift the seventh time. So, just some thoughts there. I want to welcome another speaker on stage. Marie, welcome to the stage. Please introduce yourself and then go
Sure,
ahead and share your thoughts.
sure. Thanks for having me, allowing me to speak. I'm so excited for this topic, particularly because um, I was a volunteer with the Charter for Compassion, and um, I tried. Well, I didn't try. I started this initiative called Compassion Convos, where we'd bring people together just to have conversations and really listen to different perspectives. I think the hardest part about that was that um, you have this. I mean, sometimes you can be a little bit too. I guess I was a little bit too Pollyanna-ish in a way, and thinking that this would really resolve some of the communication problems we have. And then I realized that really it's sometimes people are just not in a place yet to listen, um, to understand. And you have to really be open to that, because it feels like it could be a one-sided conversation, like someone is just against something and they don't want to hear anything else, and respecting that. Because when you start to try to convince, or you think you're not listening, you don't get anywhere. And that for me was a hard part, because I really thought that if we brought people together, they can start to really be mindful. And then the problem became is that those people who are already in there, the people who are already open to this, of course they're going to be eager to be part of the conversations. But the people who we really wanted to be part of the conversation, they weren't ready to hear anything that they didn't agree with. And I guess my struggle was, how do you get to a point where you just say, okay, you know what? This is not going anywhere. This is where this is their belief, and I have to respect that. Instead of getting frustrated, because I found myself frustrated with people who just were stuck in their beliefs and just wanted to just keep talking about their point of view. And so, what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, so let me respond to that a little bit. There's lots of stuff you shared here that was fantastic, and I loved it. But what I will say is that um, the number one thing when it comes to social media interactions and dealing with divisive people and disagreeing with people and people are doing put downs or whatever. Number one is self care. I can't even express that enough. You have to take care of yourself first, because if you are upset by it or traumatized by it or hurt by it or whatever it might be, right? It's going to be harder for you to have those conversations. And um, the expression is, a better you is a better everything else. So, if you get into a situation where it's like that, you need to step aside, you need to create space, you need to let it go. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard because you get emotionally invested and you're right in there. But to me, a general rule of thumb is when I'm talking to somebody and they bring up the same point the second or third time, that's the time for me to let it go, right? Because I already heard that point. You already made that point. I'm making a counterpoint that brings up a new topic, and you will go back to the same point. That doesn't really move the conversation forward. And so when they do, and that happens a lot on like Twitter replies and other places as well. As soon as you get to the second or third, I say, look, you're just saying the same thing over and over again. The other thing I look for is, can you acknowledge my point, right? Because unless it's like a really black and white issue, like killing is wrong. I mean, but most issues are complicated. They're nuanced, and so can you acknowledge my point? Can you evolve your point? Can you show me that you're listening and let me know that you heard what I said? And I think that goes a long way. But you have to take care of yourself, Marie. You have to like let it go and say, you know what, this is not working. It's not really helpful. I'm gonna let this conversation go. Uh, Good luck to you. All the best to you. And one of the things I've learned too through my journey on Twitter, because Twitter has, like I've engaged in difficult conversations on Facebook. I've had some amazing conversations on Facebook, and because Facebook, one of the things I love about Facebook is that first off, they're my friends, and some of them have surprising friends and acquaintances, and they have surprising opinions on things. But you can drill down into a topic until it's over. Twitter also happens as well, but Twitter is probably the most divisive amongst all the ones I've been part of. But so I've been practicing my empathy muscle. And one of the things I've learned about empathy is that if you start with empathy, if you empathize with people right away, then it hurts less when they do attack or try to, pull you into that vortex of negativity. So when someone says to me, Bobby, you suck, or Bobby, you're fat, or Bobby, you're old, or whatever it might be, right? Like, I'm not gonna say that it doesn't hurt. Sometimes it does hurt, absolutely, because I'm a human being. But I start with empathy. When I say empathy, I mean, okay, can I understand what this person's feeling? You know, can I understand why they're feeling this way? And can I support those feelings? And that's kind of how empathy works. And most people who are spewing such stuff like that are triggered. They're they're hurt. They're damaged. The expression "hurt people hurt people." And so, if you understand that, it hurts less when they do that stuff. Not saying it doesn't hurt at all. It sure hurts a little bit. Absolutely. That woman who went after me a couple years ago, just calling me a fat blob all the time. And I could understand why she was doing it. She's like, I just feel like I can, and she just kept doing it over. And all my other friends were defending me. Bobby, what? They said, why are you calling? Why, don't you realize it's a public forum? Why? And clearly she was a troll. And I was like, guys, don't feed the trolls, please. Like it's not worth it. But yeah, it hurt a little bit. So, I mean, those are my initial thoughts on that. I think that, it happens, but I think self care is so important. Um, and the other thing you mentioned that I want to talk about is the people who are not ready. So there are people who are firmly entrenched in a position, and they are so entrenched in that position, or maybe that they're like those one issue people that are out there just spewing about that one thing. Um, you know, I would say that if you are a one issue or a person that has a completely unmovable opinion or intransigent, and you are not willing to acknowledge people's points or listen to alternate perspectives, then essentially, when you're out there, you're a troll. You become a troll. So either stop doing that because you're going to look like a troll, or just sit and listen a little bit more, because those people who don't even do that, yeah, they end up becoming trolls. And I'm a bit of a troll buster, but I don't have time for that kind of nonsense, right? So I might try for a little bit, but eventually I let it go. Now, those of you in the space, we're talking about how to disagree with someone without putting them down. This is called The Power of Connection. It's a weekly Twitter space I host every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And there's people on stage. Please stay on stage. I love having you on here. I would invite some of you to come on stage and join me. Share your thoughts on, how you engage people, how you deal with divisive rhetoric, how do you have strong social commentary or political discourse without getting heated? What are some of the challenges, struggles you have? I want to share with you my knowledge, but I also want to take the knowledge of people here. So if you want to come on stage, put your hand up. We'd love to have you here. if you like the space, I encourage you to take the tweets that are in the if you take the tweets that are actually in the post up above the nest. I'd love for you to actually share them with the community. Tweet them out. Let's get more people in the room. I'd love to have that conversation. With that, I'm going to transition over to Peter. Welcome to the stage. Introduce yourself, please, and then go ahead with your comment or question.
Thanks. My name is Peter Habeck, and I've been active on Twitter Spaces for a couple of years, I guess, mainly talking about sports, in particular Formula One racing. And I have had experiences with Spaces, and I'd say pretty small, like the few hundreds or so participants, and it strikes me that it's been a really interesting lab to learn about a lot of different viewpoints, and to really hone my skills as a moderator in allowing as many different viewpoints in the same space as possible. But it does take a quite concerted amount of effort to really, I mean, I love what you said about empathy. I think that's a very core component of holding a space. But I think there's a few things that can be very much in tension or opposition, just dynamically, before you even pick a subject or invite an audience. And a couple of those things include an agreed upon set of facts, or an agreed upon understanding of the facts. In other words, what things do we know? What things don't we know? What's been, sort of agreed upon in principle, and then really holding the audience to account to the actual facts. You'll get a lot of opinion. I'll get a lot of opinion that tries to pose as facts in some of the spaces that I hold, and I find that keeping folks honest with what's known and understood, or maybe sort of late breaking news, is really key to kind of, I would say, just sort of setting the boundaries of the discussion. And I think the other piece is that it's really opened my eyes to holding spaces has really opened my eyes to the importance of realizing what a shared experience can be for a group, say watching a race or talking about an issue that affects a large community, and then what our individual lived experiences are that we bring to that discussion. And a lot of times I see moderators who either don't acknowledge an individual lived experience, or other participants in a space who don't acknowledge that individual lived experience of a speaker and how that can affect their view of a situation. And I wish we saw more of that. I guess that really ties into your empathy point. But I think one of the things I'm curious to hear your opinion on, Bobby, is what oftentimes these spaces are held for is really to sort of gain more followers, gain a wider influence over a subject area. And one of the things that does that is engagement. And one of those components of engagement is sort of enragement. And sort of, it would be great, I feel, for everyone if we all kind of brought a broader awareness of sort of those dynamics that are at play in the background that can tap into maybe a lack of awareness or even self-awareness on behalf of the participants. So sort of creating a more informed space as speaker, to me is really a core part, I think, of having a better discussion. And I think the whole point of spaces really is to sort of move a conversation forward. In other words, gain a broader, better understanding of a subject, or informing a wider sort of community on a topic. Even if you don't agree, it is important, I think, to have that real core set of understood facts, and really moving a debate forward which is something I think America is really, and the world has really seen a big sort of decline in, is an agreed upon set of facts when it comes to a broader discussion. But the tension between sort of the needs of a moderator to kind of move forward a follower number or an influence over a sort of subject domain area in order to gain more followers. A lot of times there is that sort of baiting, if you like, of an audience. And I wonder if you could speak to sort of what you've seen work and not work in terms of maybe informing Twitter users in general to be sort of smarter, better, and more informed participants in spaces.
Wow, Peter, that was amazing. So I just want to throw much more applause, man. That was incredible what you said. I particularly was moved by the discussion, the point about, holding and listening to people's individual experiences. That's awesome. I love that because every single individual experience varies. Going to and then I think the other thing I'll say is that it's incredibly important to have a really good facilitator or host. Like honestly, like if I was gonna have, I was planning during the pandemic, I was planning some, dinners with like 12 people with a friend of mine who was very political, and we agreed that the only way to have people of opposing opinions at the dinner table and have a fruitful discussion was to have someone who was the facilitator. You had to have a facilitator to moderate things. And then the other point of yours around, agreeing on the facts. Yeah, that's so hard now because, like, can you imagine? Like, I love that idea. Here are the facts that were going on in terms of how we move the conversation. But then, people always bring in their own stuff. And what about this? What about that? Have you seen this thing? Or the worst thing, have you seen this YouTube video of somebody? Okay, yeah, thanks. So I think, man, I can't even imagine having a conversation about vaccines, and then having agreed upon facts, because I'm sure people would bring up a whole bunch of stuff. So I think that would be really, really difficult. But I like the idea of, number one, setting the ground rules. Now, going back to your thing about social media and Twitter users and things like that, the truth is, when it comes to social media, I've learned this on social media, on Twitter and LinkedIn and other platforms too, is that there are many paths to gain followers and to gain notoriety in your space. So if you're the one on Twitter who's cracking a joke every day about things going on in the world, you'll get a following. If you're the one that's ranting every day in Twitter Spaces or something else about something to be, controversial or to whatever you want to call it, you will gain followers. I mean, I remember Howard Stern back in the day. He was the shock jock, right? Because he would say, crazy stuff, and he would also just do it and put out there, but he would gain a following because of that. Now, that's a brand, right? Whatever you decide to choose and put out there will create the brand for yourself. For me, I've chosen the brand, which is basically my pinned tweet. I've chosen to create spaces that are more about empathy, compassion, listening, inclusivity. I've chosen to try to take the positive approach. I've chosen to listen to people. I've chosen to, turn the cheek. And sometimes it doesn't work. I'll be frank. Sometimes it doesn't work. There are people that shit all over me, and that's fine. There's people who say, well, you say in your pinned tweet that you do all this stuff, but then that one tweet you retweeted, someone used the name idiot, so you're a hypocrite. And I'm like, well, look, 90% of my tweets are like, I try to really just talk about the issues and talk about behaviors and actions. And once in a while someone makes a funny post and they use a name, and so I retweet it. That doesn't mean that I'm completely going against what I believe. I just thought the tweet was really funny. So people often, lack the context. So going back to and I don't even know if I'm going to answer your question, Peter, but the general thing I'm saying is that you build the brand that you want to build, right? How you decide to engage on this platform is the brand the integrity, the reputation you're going to build for yourself. There are people I know who are ranters. There are people I know who are really funny. There are people, and for me, like, the truth is, I'm a professional speaker, and I chose motivational speaking, and I'm a really good communicator, whether I write or whether I speak. And the truth is, if I want to rant, or if I want to do like comedy, or do what's that called? What's that comedic stuff where they they go after each other like it's like a comedic battle.
Roasting.
Roasting, yeah, exactly. uh
Can you
I
imagine, Bobby?
I no, but the truth is, if I wanted to do that, Gia, I actually would be pretty good at it. I just chose not to. Like someone asked me one time, Bobby, why don't you just do a rant and just rant like for 10 minutes and not turn into like a positive learning spin? And I was like, oh man, I can't do that. That's just not me. But I could do it. I mean, sometimes, I mean, there are the rare times when I'm with a couple of my guy friends and we're over and I start mocking them a little bit, and they're like, damn, Bobby, you're harsh. And, but no one sees that on Twitter or in my speaking or whatever, right? But I could be, I chose to use my power for good in the way I determine and I define it, right? So for me, I'm going to make the impact by encouraging people to be empathetic, encouraging people to be kind and compassionate, to try to be inclusive, try to build bridges, and other people are quite effective and successful doing it in other ways, whether it's comedy or whether it's like really having really powerful rants or evidence-based type stuff, and that's up to them. But for me, I've chosen this path, and that's what works for me. Peter, I'm not sure if I answered your question because I mean you had some great insights, but uh, let me know if you have a follow up or if you need me to clarify something.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I think um, in the spaces that I moderate, there often is less than a complete set of facts, and one of the things that we'll see happen is we'll see a fan of one driver attack a fan of another driver, let's say, and you know, or they'll start talking about a driver in sort of terms that say someone who actually knew that person, would be qualified to speak on. And so one of the boundaries that I've set in spaces that I host is, you can't really talk about you can talk about what someone may be likely to do on track, but when it comes to sort of, what they what they prefer sort of in their private life or anything like that you don't have any visibility to or awareness of. I call speakers out on that and I say, well, do you know this person, or have you had lunch with them, or and the obvious answer is usually no, but it's important, I think, to kind of maintain that sense of, I appreciate, where they're coming from, and I can understand, how this person reminds them of someone in their life, right? I mean, I think we've all kind of been there. But it can also be the fact that, there may be other circumstances or situations that, we're not aware of, that could be contributing to a different, outcome that no one in the room would expect. So, it's not to play devil's advocate and sort of be that guy, but more to just create, I think, a better sense of awareness of like, okay, hey, actually, everyone in this room actually shares a roughly the same knowledge base. No one here has a monopoly on, on the information or the facts. And in fact, the space really is designed more to share what we do know. And oftentimes there'll be breaking news in the middle of the space too. So it's the idea that, people can use their voice for many different things, but attacking others based on what they feel is not okay, and putting making assertions that are untrue. A lot of times I'll find myself spending time really halting a litany against one side or the other, or often both sides, because it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't advance the knowledge and the understanding of a situation. And there's oftentimes a greater problem that's the contributing cause of what we're all experiencing in a moment. And trying to refocus attention towards, I would say, a sort of shared problem as opposed to an individual grievance, can really be. I feel like that moves the group forward, and it serves. I think it serves to inform and often educate people in a way that just listening to someone bash, which may mirror my own or someone else's own point of view or sentiment, is a little bit indulgent sometimes, and so it's more of, I think, really, I guess my question to you, in the previous um, uh, in previously was really, how do you how do you think that listeners and speakers can be better informed about understanding point of view or agenda or even correctness when it comes to an individual speaking, and that can be the professional who's speaking to a large audience, or it could be just an individual speaker who has a question that has a very slanted direction or targeted point of view that they wish to kind of assert. I mean, I just think it would be better for everyone to almost take a debate 101 class, if you like, or able to contribute more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to figure out. I mean, you mentioned different things, setting ground rules in the discussion, determining what facts we want to agree upon, giving people and teaching them a little bit about empathy and how that works and what it means to be empathetic as an active listener. Teaching people about debate or discussion rules, or critical thinking and how that works. Setting the tone to say, hey, um, if this is a space where people need to be open about their opinions and open about maybe being a bit more fluid in terms of being willing to change or shift their opinion because of the knowledge they'll gain here, and setting that tone. But the truth is, I mean, it's pretty hard to. I mean, the only thing honestly, Peter, the only thing I say is, like, you know, have the structure, have the rules, have the have some good people who are there to help facilitate things, but and keep having those conversations. But it's very difficult to guarantee it's going to be perfect, especially for the more important things in the world right now. Like, we have so many different issues right now with the ending of the pandemic, and with and the environment, and with politics, and just, it's a very complicated world right now. And now, like, you look on Twitter, you look at other places, there, the world is far more divisive and toxic than it used to be. Social media has been part of the problem. It's also can be part of the solution. Um, and I think that we need to encourage more of us to have these civil discourses, and more of us to because if we have if more of us are doing this, and more of us are having and being trained in critical thinking and understanding context, and having more empathy training, then we're going to be able to. And if we can help that in the education systems and in all the different government and business systems, to have more empathy, compassion, have more critical thinking, have more contextual based learning and understanding, then we're going to be in a better place. Because right now the ranters are louder than we are. So I think that's a bit of a challenge, and so we want to be able to keep having, and that's why I'm having this discussion. That's why I'm having the Power Connection every week, because I want to teach people that there's a way that we can do this to get out of this, and to have better conversations, so that we can actually learn and grow together. Gia, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Thanks, Bobby. One of the things that we have to consider is that we will have difficult conversations everywhere we go. It doesn't matter where we are, in spaces, in our homes, between our families, with our friends, with our children. There will always be difficult conversations with clients. But when it comes to spaces for this topic, exclusively, is that it starts with, I like how Peter said it. He said awareness. The awareness of the host, the awareness of the speakers as well. As a host, it's kind of important, and it's critical too, to the safety of your space, to the safety of your speakers as well. Because when we open spaces as a host, I feel I have the responsibility of providing a safe space for my speakers, for my audience, for everyone who is trying to come here. Because a lot of people are not are not used to speaking in public all the time. So you're giving them a platform. So as a host, it's my responsibility. So one of the things that we can do is that maybe we can, Bobby, please let me know if I'm on the right path with this one. Facilitation skills, moderation skills. There are so many types of moderation. There's an interactive mode. There is a raise your hand mode. There's a facilitation mode. There are so many different types of facilitating and moderating rooms. And for example, interactive mode does not work in spaces where you're having an interview. Interactive mode can work better when your audience are used to your interactive mode style. So the style of the host is crucial to the development of the space and the results that you're getting from that space, and how your speakers feel when they're in that space. Is this a space I can speak my mind, or is this a space where I just need to listen and learn something from? So Peter mentioned a lot of good things, and thank you so much, Bobby, for the points as well. So this is a time where awareness and campaigns on moderation styles, facilitation styles, host etiquette, guest etiquette, and listener etiquette as well. And it's a lot that goes into this. We still need time. I've been hosting spaces for over a year now, and I still see that this is a need. It's still crucial that we still raise awareness on hosting social audio spaces. I'm done.
That's great. That's great. And good, perfect timing for a segue, because tomorrow I'm actually doing a LinkedIn audio room on how to rock LinkedIn audio events, because I think one of the things a lot of people don't know is how to run rooms properly. And so, having done 10,000 hours on Clubhouse and 2,000 hours on Twitter Spaces, I've done over 250 hours on LinkedIn audio rooms, and people need to learn. So my company, Thought Leadership Brand Club, TLB Branding on Twitter, TLB Branding Club, sorry, on Twitter. We teach people how to facilitate rooms, how to create safe, inclusive spaces, how to deal with conflict, how to actually cut someone off politely, how to cut someone off tersely. We teach people that because there's times where you have to learn how to do those things. And so, especially if you want to talk politics or social justice or things like that. So, yeah, I think what you said was great, and I'm glad you said that. And so, actually, if people are on LinkedIn, I'll be doing an audio room talking about how to actually run really good rooms on different spaces. And again, what's interesting is Twitter Space and Clubhouse Spaces are differently run than LinkedIn audio rooms. I find that Twitter has a culture where people say whatever they want. So I love Twitter Spaces because people come up on stage and say whatever they want, which is great. Whereas in LinkedIn, people are more on the professional side, so they're a little bit more. They're more safe. They're not willing to go a little bit out there. And on Clubhouse again has a broad range of people, and the culture there is based on the facilitator. So it's really important to have the right facilitator to learn how to do that stuff. And again, if you're just listening to this, we're talking about how to disagree with someone without putting them down. We're talking about how to have civil discourse, how to deal with haters, trolls, like all that kind of stuff. This is the Power Connection Chat. If you want to come on stage and ask a question, share your thoughts or share your story, I'd love to have you up here. If you like what you're hearing, please tweet it out. In fact, I recommend you tweet it out by saying, something about what you learned. Peter said this, and Gia said this, and Marie said this, and I disagree with what Bobby said about this, humbly, and make your point. And then you share the link and you tag me. If you tag me, what's great about that is that then I'll be able to see the tweet, and then I can retweet to my 500,000 followers, which will get more people in the room, and also maybe bring you some extra followers. So it's a win-win. So share that love and share that the feedback or share the learning from this room. You can also take a picture and share it on LinkedIn or share it on Instagram, whatever you want. Let's go back to Marie. Go ahead, please. Your hand's up.
Sure, thank you. I love all the points that Gia and Peter shared. And Bobby, I will be attending your event tomorrow because I do host a weekly LinkedIn and I can use some help. I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, which I struggle with it, which is when you're doing work, particularly like anything that's around social justice or anything that gets people that people have opposing views on, and conversations can get heated. There's times where you, as the host, or let's say you're tweeting, people have this expectation for you to always be perfect, right? Like you said something, or you made this comment, but you're supposed to be about DEI. But how do you handle that? Like, how do you help people to understand that, like, I'm not saying anything that's hate filled. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. If I call out something, I find that then it becomes, well, if you're supposed to be so, emotionally intelligent, blah, 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 you talk about all this stuff, but you just called. But don't you have the right to call out too if you see something that is unjust or unfair? Or is it how you do it? Because I do it in a way that I don't put anyone down, but I want to bring a light to it. But I find that, and I don't know also if it's because I see it happen a lot to just different people, but a lot more to people of color. So if you had any pointers or tips on how to handle that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think generally speaking, first off, you know, we're human, so we're not perfect, and it's important for us to, when we falter, to understand why we faltered. Well, so if I start name calling somebody, am I really angry? Why am I upset? What's going on? But understand what's going on there. And then number two, to forgive yourself, right? Forgive yourself for if it goes a certain way. Now, when people say, well, I'm off brand because I name called, I know my brand is mostly about inclusivity and listening and compassion. And I definitely am not a fan of name calling and demeaning people and things like that. So I rarely do that. But if it happens, it happens. And when the people critique me on it, I'm like, well, look, I know what my brand stands for. I stand by the 9+% of my tweets that are super like this. And then going back, and if you're in the DEI space, yeah, I mean, it's actually quite ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm using strong language here, guys. It's ridiculous that people are not allowed to call out stuff, right? In fact, I did a tweet yesterday about actually because I'm from Canada, and they just elected a new leader of the Conservative Party in Canada, and my biggest issue when it comes to politics is hypocrisy. People like the whataboutism and the hypocrisy. Like they're not willing to call out their own leaders they follow, but they call everybody else and say, "Oh, this person's divisive." Yeah, what about your guy? He just said this. Like call them all out. And I said, call that shit out to everybody. It's not who if it's someone you love and they do something wrong, call it out. If someone you don't love doesn't, call it out. But generally speaking, if you can't call people that you follow or love, then you've lost, you're biased, right? And you've lost your ability to be more objective and have that critical thinking piece. How do you say it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wish I could see the tweet you said, but I mean, generally speaking, I definitely I would call stuff out, and if people will, have an issue with what you're doing, you can certainly call people out, even if they're in the DEI space. I remember talking to I was talking to someone who was queer, LGBTQ, and there was someone in our space, and he was a trans dad in our community, and he was saying some really out there stuff, and then I I commented, I said, what you're saying doesn't make sense to me. Like, have you thought about this? And then all of a sudden, someone just said that I'm transphobic, and I was like, well. And then I asked my queer friend, like, can you tell me what's going on? And then he just told me, you know what? No, he's being a dick. And I was like, okay, good, because sometimes like people, right? Whether you're LGBTQ or you're a BIPOC or you're yeah, sometimes people act badly, and so you got to call that out. And if you call it out with integrity, you call it the behaviors without actually name calling. Just say, look, when they did this, the perception is this. Then you can't be faulted for pointing that out. Sometimes I'll say something like, when someone does this, it's likely to be perceived as this by people, and you need to be mindful that are careful of those types of things. And when I do it that way, it's a much safer space. But sometimes I say, hey, you know what? When they did that behavior, that was just wrong. That was wrong, period. End of story. Here's why. Boom, boom, chicka boom, and I'll lay it out in a tweet. And sometimes they'll be more forceful, sometimes they'll be more gentle. It really depends on the severity of what they did and how bad it is. And there's sometimes it's better to be more forceful. Other times it's better to be more more gentle in terms of how you call it out. Peter, hands up. Why don't you share your thoughts? Oh, and then Gia after that, after him.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I just was gonna piggyback off kind of something you were really alluding to, and it's sort of the sort of A or B mentality that people can often find themselves. I consider themselves to be a little bit trapped in that, and one of the sort of things that I remind myself a lot of times when things get very black or white for people is that coming into a space, we have a wide palette of different experiences and opinions and possible outcomes. And I try to remind myself a lot of times that, in sort of traditional media, which which we've all experienced watching television or, listening to a radio ad or any number of different things, we're often presented with a very binary choice. Coke or Pepsi. It's very, Republican or Democrat. It's very one or the other. If you're not one, then you're definitely the other. And I find that it's helpful for me to just remind myself that in the real world, it's much easier to sell Coke versus Pepsi. It's much easier to sell one against the other, and that's the way a lot of traditional media targeting has evolved, because that's what sells. It's much more difficult if you're a marketer or you're running a media outlet to sell a third option, because it confuses people. It's not as clear. It seems, less unique or less distinctive or any number of reasons. But, really what's the engine behind a lot of that is economic. It's very much, one versus the other. And because that is what's easier to target, it's what's easier to measure, it's what's easier to sell, and brands and to your point, our audience members have evolved this way of either perceiving or absorbing or taking in information that helps us kind of move on with our life, because we do want A or B kinds of decisions. And in the real world, life is many, many, many more different possible outcomes. And I
Hey, Peter, you cut off the last 2 seconds. Sorry, your last 5 seconds, Peter, you've cut off. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just any kind of human issue that I think, needs that consideration. So I try to, remind myself of that and the need for, explaining, things that are not such in black and white terms.
Go ahead, Gia.
Oh, I was just going to say, when you have a situation and like that, just like what's her name, the lady, Mary, when she addressed that, how do you address that? How do you address exact the person? Do you go for their point? I know I heard someone before say basically don't attack personally, don't attack the person personally, or just attack the point. So, what are your points on that? How do you disagree with someone without basically being emotional, especially when they come at you personally?
Well, there's lots of things you can do. I mean, but the general rule of debate, I mean, the way to win a debate or a discussion is to actually go after the assumptions that are being made, right? So every argument is based on a foundation of facts and assumptions, and so they give you the facts, and then they use assumptions that are not actually explicitly stated, but they're there, and if you can actually dive into the assumptions that are these opinions are being based on, or these assertions being based on, that's kind of how you can win a debate, because oftentimes that's where it goes. Some people, depending on how they do it, I'll be curious. I'll be curious. I'm curious why you feel this way. I'm curious why you say that. And in doing so, I'm able to actually facilitate a discussion with them where they share. I invite them to share their story, and then I'll say, "Hey, listen, are you open to me sharing my thought on this?" And so then I'm able to focus on that. Now, if someone's coming at you harshly, I mean, again, self-care, right? Do you feel emotionally up to dealing with them? Because if you don't, you know what? Turn off Twitter and go hug somebody. Like, honestly, it's not worth it if you're not in the best spirits, right? But number two, you know, uh, if someone comes at me with a fact, and this is a very common thing that happens, you know, someone say some sort of fact. A really common thing is someone gives me some crazy wrong fact about COVID or masking or vaccines. And I'll say, look, first off, not sure why you're applying this tweet, but here's the facts. If you have a source, let me know. Otherwise, please let this go. And that's it. And then I don't engage with them because, you know, it's just for me. I'll just spend my time doing one tweet. I'll either ignore it or I'll share one tweet to call it out, and then. But I didn't want to get into the debate with that person because I know that they're already responding in a very angry way. Because you know how people reply tells you a lot about how they are, right? And so that context goes a long way into knowing which conversations to get into and which ones to actually avoid. I see Tim's on stage. Tim, go ahead. Your hand's up.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to come up, and hello to all of you. I haven't met you before. And I was listening to the question, and I wanted to share a perspective that I tend to use at times when someone says something that may be off-putting for other people or they come across the wrong way. And I've used this in spaces as well when someone does something and it may offend some people or it could be conceived or perceived the wrong way. I'll often let people know that, hey, you know what? I want to go back to a comment that was made. And based on that comment, this is a teachable moment for all of us to be able to grow. And by doing that, it takes down any potential defenses that people may have. And they understand that everybody can grow from it. And it allows people to see a better way to approach the situation. And it allows them to also understand how to more effectively think about things that they're going to say before they say it so that they have consideration for how our words can impact people and the fact that we never know one comment we make can literally change someone's life positively or negatively. So I always frame it as a teachable moment, and that way everyone is able to, most times most people are able to receive it that way and not be upset or offended by it.
That's excellent, Tim. And you know, again, how they respond to that, because there's still going to be that 2 to 10% who will respond terribly. We'll tell you a bit about who they are and how they are. So I do appreciate that. I see other people's hands are up too. So I'm going to go to Sharon, then Lawrence. Sharon, go ahead.
Okay, how are you? It's Sharon. I know the E confuses
Oh,
people,
sorry about
but
that. My
no,
apologies.
don't worry. It's not you. It's not you. It's the E. It's the E. So I can't fault anyone
That
for
darn
using
E,
the
right?
Sharon. It
It's either
is
that
the damn E.
or
Um,
Sharony. You know, Sharon. I don't know, but
no,
I'm
no,
not
good
sure.
Lord, no, just Sharon, just Sharon. But I think one of the things, and I think both you and Peter said it, um, and I want to reiterate. I think when we go into spaces, you were talking about how LinkedIn has a different type of environment or atmosphere. And I think one of the reasons why LinkedIn is a little different from Clubhouse and from Twitter Spaces is that people on LinkedIn do take the time to look at a person's credentials, and that sort of bolsters or supports their integrity. And I think one of the things people do on Twitter that I find a lot of the times, they do give a lot of unsupported information as if it was factual. They do definitely bring emotion into an argument that is irrelevant or unnecessary, and that can be harmful. And I think when people are, you know, going into a Twitter space, before they react to what someone is saying or a person or information a person is giving, they should at least look at the profile and some of the information the person has liked or tweeted to gather if this person is qualified to speak on the subject, has the integrity to speak on the subject. And also, it's one thing to share your opinion, and opinions are good. It allows us to learn from each other, even if it's an opinion. You don't have to just, learn from facts. But I do think people, when they are giving, they're hosting these Twitter spaces, when you're talking about how to moderate those spaces, looking at that qualifier, is this person the appropriate person to speak on this subject in this manner, can actually resolve or reduce a lot of what I see as argument in some spaces. And it takes away the conversation and it devolves it into um, an emotional rant, which most people don't want. Most people actually do want to learn. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh no, that's fine. That's great, and I agree with you. In fact, when I train people on how to host a room on LinkedIn or Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse, we talk about who do you bring up and how do you make sure it's safe. So if they don't have a profile or a bio or any information about them, you have to be hesitant about that. Every single one, and I'll be very frank, every single one of you, before I let you up on stage, I checked out your profile before I let you up. I just did that on purpose. Not except for Gia, because I know her. So hey, Gia. So but
Hey, Bobby.
but for the most part, I looked you guys up, and I had to do that on purpose because I want to create a safe space. I want to bring up people who are going to cause a ruckus or cause a problem that is that devolves from the conversation. So, Lawrence, welcome. Please go ahead.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Bobby. Gia, what's going on? My sister over there. I got to start off first. When Sharon was speaking, the dad joker in me was just like, she should have just hit him with the "it's not you, it's E." I just couldn't resist. Anyway, all right. So moving on to the question that you have here. Personally, I disagree with very, very few people, and the reason that is because for me, if I disagree with someone, like I'm going to share an alternative perspective. That's usually because I'm trying to change somebody's behavior or view on something, or I care about that person. I just don't want them to go around with like a dangerous opinion or taking like a bad course of action. So one of the things that's central to that for me is this principle that I live by that says that whoever does the thinking does the learning. So what I found in trying to disagree with someone, especially respectfully, is that I don't attack their position and I don't data vomit and throw a bunch of facts at them. What I do is I look for the holes in their argument and then I ask them questions about it. Like, so if you're going to do X, do you really want to deal with Y? Because that's likely what's going to happen if you pursue that course. So I put the question to them to get them to think about their position, to try and ask, does it make sense, or to justify why they're in that spot. And I found that to be pretty effective when I'm trying to convince people to, change their minds or change their behavior or do something differently. Because most central to this point for me is I'm not an expert in anything. There are many times that I may know better than someone else because I have a different lived experience or maybe possess better information. So for me, at all times, I take the tack that I'm always just simply sharing my perspective. Much like when someone, in the marketing aspect, they say somebody has to come in contact with a product like somewhere between like 6 to 8 times before they say, yeah, I'm going to buy it, or that's the service that I'm going to sign up for. I think that people changing their minds is the same way. So if you take that kind of long game approach, I find that overall, or in the long haul, you're more overall successful. The reason why emotion and putting people down and attacking them personally comes into play so heavily is because usually someone wants somebody to change right now. Like in that moment, I speak words to you and you instantly reverse your position. That's not realistic based on how human, right? So that's why I don't try to achieve that goal. I believe it's an unrealistic expectation. And the last thing I'll say there is just make sure when you are speaking that you do indeed own your statements. I see this, I believe this. If it were me, I would. You want to stay away from the yous and you shoulds and things like that, because that language feels very aggressive and accusatory, and it gets some people to go into defense mode, and then you find they lock even deeper into their position. So that's just very, very counter to you trying to disagree with someone with the hopes of changing their perspective or behavior.
Yeah, I love that, Lawrence. I definitely do that too. I mean, when I talk to people, and I do this mostly live, I don't do this on Twitter. But when I'm in a live conversation with somebody, I'll ask those questions to understand where they're at, or have you thought about this, or what about this, and how do you manage this situation? I think that it works very, very well with anybody, even when they have a contrary position. So I do like that. I think it's important for us to still try to assert ourselves and take positions and, put out there to change the world for a better place. I think that's important too. And my wife and I often have a running joke where I'll say to her, and she'll say to me, "You know what your problem is," and we say that because that's the worst thing to say to somebody, right? To get them to listen to you. Like, how do you expect to? And then
Hey, hold up, Bobby. I got one for you. Let me tell you why you're. Well, let me tell you why you're wrong.
okay, who says that? Who says that? Oh my god! Let me tell you why you're wrong. You know why you're wrong. It's so funny. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was that early in the conversation, you may not have been here for this, Lawrence, but I was like, look, when it comes to this, you got to play the long game, guys. You got to play the long game for getting people to learn and educate and inform and things like that, right? It's not going to happen right away. If your goal is to convince someone right away, that's usually quite fruitless because most people who express those harsh opinions, particularly in a disagreement, they're not going to be changed right away with a simple reply to a tweet. Well, here's why you're wrong, or what about this data? No, you have to engage them in conversation. You have to listen to them, and it's a longer game. You have to like really invest in. Sharon, and guys, just so you know, we're nearing the end of my time here, so I'm going to hear from Sharon, and then I'm going to hear from Peter, and then I'm going to have to close it up with some final thoughts. Anyone else who's requesting to come on stage, I apologize, I can't get you guys on stage. Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay, just to bolster or support Lawrence's words here, I don't know if you, I don't know. But this is education. That's literally everyone here has gone through school at some point, at some stage. And that is how education curriculum is made, to build on the next opportunity to teach, to further knowledge. And so you are quite correct in stating that having a 5-minute conversation or a 5-second Twitter disagreement with someone may not produce any change. And in some cases, that's not what the person is trying to do. But if you are there to educate, not making personalized statements and literally giving, you know, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Building something for people to building your argument on for someone to build on, to research themselves and come to a conclusion can be actually the most efficient way of getting someone to open up and to listen to what you said. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of the nature of the sugar high that comes along with ad hominem attacks, and maybe talk a little bit about how that tends to be the weakest form of attacking someone's argument.
Well, there's a lot. I encourage everyone to do a research project to understand all the different logical fallacies that are out there. There's some great articles and websites that show that. But the ad hominem attack, that's the simple one where you basically name call, and the whole idea is that you're trying to make them feel like shit, and you're trying to make yourself feel better because you think that you're a better person than that person is. It's a little bit of an ego, and it's also a power play to assert your position. But in the end, it does nothing to move the conversation forward. It does nothing to create better understanding. It does nothing to make your point. It just really fuels further divide. And so that's why it's one of the most simplest and easiest to use, right? Because it's very easy to use that one, but it's also the least effective and the one that you can easily cause. Like, look, there's no point in having name calling because what's the point of having an ad hominem attack? I'm not going to engage in this. And this goes back to my other point about, self-care. As soon as someone does that, well, Bobby, you're an idiot. Well, it's probably a time for me to not even engage anymore and let go, right? Self-care, take care of yourself. So, and the emotional high of it, I think people, it's like swearing. Sometimes you swear, when you say shit, you feel better sometimes. There's a bit of a endorphin when you swear, and I get it. Other people like the endorphin. There's actually the endorphin of saying things like jerk or idiot or stupid or nutbar or whatever they might want to say. So there's that. But at the end of the day, as soon as someone does that, don't engage or let go or just call it out and let it go because it's not worth it. So with that, guys, I'm going to in this call. It's just an FYI. I do several social rooms per week. So I do on Sundays I do LinkedIn Mastery and Twitter Spaces. Today I do a Power of Connection in the morning, and then I do a Clubhouse room at 4 p.m. today called LinkedIn Mastery Mindset and Confidence. That's on Clubhouse. Then on Tuesdays I do the LinkedIn Audio event, which I have at the above. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about how to rock LinkedIn Audio events. And then I do another one on Thursday on LinkedIn Audio. So I'm doing Twitter Spaces, I'm doing LinkedIn Audio, I'm doing Clubhouse rooms. And if you want to learn more about me, by all means, just follow my stuff. You can see what I'm up to, and I'll be here every week on Monday for this one on at 11 a.m. If you did like the space or you learned something from it, I really encourage you when the replay shows up, please share 1, 2, or 3 learnings. Share a photo, tweet this out there, put it on LinkedIn, tag me and everything. And if I see it, I'll tag you. I'll reply, or I'll at least retweet it to my 500,000 followers, and that'll maybe get some notice as well. So it's win-win for all of us. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Marie, Gia, Peter, Sharon, Lawrence, Tim, for coming up on stage. Thanks for everyone else in the audience for listening. I wish you all the best. And remember, you don't have to. If you haven't done this already, I'm going to read my pinned tweet to you. Okay, just to remind you, you can disagree with someone without putting them down. You can listen to understand instead of listening to refute. Build bridges of understanding, not chasms of divide. So check your bias, check your assumptions, and check your fear, hate, and ignorance at the door. Lead with empathy and love. With that, I'm closing the room, guys. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Bobby.
My
Thank
pleasure. In the room in 3, 2,
Bye-bye.
1.
Thank you.
Bye.